You may be seated. Friends and family of Heather and Charles, welcome. From near and far, we're here today so that these two can stand before us and make public a lifelong commitment to each other. We will all be witnesses, and so, in a way, we will all be committed parties to their marriage. We'll begin with a poem read by the sister of the bride.
I'd like to read a poem by James Kavanaugh, which is called To Love Is Not to Possess. To love is not to possess, to own or imprison, nor to lose oneself in another. Love is to join and to separate, to walk alone and together, to find a laughing freedom that lonely isolation does not permit. It is finally to be able to be who we really are. No longer clinging in childish dependency, nor docilely living separate lives in silence. It is to be perfectly oneself and perfectly joined in perfect and permanent commitment to another and to one's inner self. Love only endures when it moves like waves, receding and returning gently or passionately, or moving lovingly like the tide in the moon's own predictable harmony. Because finally, despite a child's scars or an adult's deepest wounds, they are openly free to be who they really are and always secretly were, in the very core of their being, where true and lasting love can alone abide.
Passion is not a word I would have associated with Charles when we were friends and college roommates. His chaste exploits were largely top secret. His sole apparent passion, which he shared with and perhaps inherited from his father, was for all things automotive. I would realize later that one part of my personal bond with Charles was that when we spent a lot of time together, such as during a couple overnight drives from North Carolina to Miami, largely underwritten by the Haynes family, he and I were content to let each other keep quiet on an emotional level. Neither of us were interested in expressing any substantive emotions, and were content to let each other do the same. I visited Charles after he'd been stationed in Guinea for about 8 months. When he first greeted me there, his English was rusty from underuse, and he was even more reserved than usual. But over the next few days, we began to talk openly and deeply about our recent lives and transitions. I was struck, and we discussed, just how lonely he must have been out there, in his village, a 2-hour walk from even potential communication with the outside world. In those few days, through Kavanaugh's freedom that lonely isolation does not permit, I think I got a glimpse of the passion he had tucked away for all those years. Heather would eventually find and permanently awaken that passion in Charles. And I think many of us can attest that Heather and Charles' relationship is one of passion. In fact, many of us can bear witness that it is an openly passionate one. It will no doubt be a marriage of passion as well. Some folks, if not most, would say that passion is a component of a marriage, but it cannot be the sole or even primary force holding up two people in a life built together. I don't really know whether his time in the Peace Corps was a period of monastic discovery for Charles. There's no way that it wasn't a period of growth and reflection that very few of us can understand. But there is one person here who certainly does. We all know that Charles and Heather first met during their time in Guinea, even if their relationship didn't take hold until years later. But even if they did not initially hit it off in country, the basis of the shared experience and the variation between their experiences is important. Though Heather and Charles were both technically in the same region, Heather's surroundings were quite different. The landscape was flat, not nearly as lush, and it was hot. Heather often followed the local custom of sleeping outdoors, under the night sky, though she had a friend in a relatively nearby village. For the first part of her time during the first long months, if you call 8 miles by foot nearby, she was largely isolated from anyone who understood her native culture. Separately, they both found themselves looking forward to correspondence from home or a break from the loneliness brought on by the language barrier, the feeling of always being guarded among strangers. There are relationships in which two people grow together. I think of people wed before they fully know themselves, much less to know another person. There are also marriages of convenience, and even those of necessity, but thankfully we are not talking about those today. This is a relationship in which the two people chose seemingly unique paths that turned out to be not unique at all, but rather paths in parallel. That gave them a shared history, even if they actually shared hardly any time together. Thus, they share a history even while each of their memories and experiences remain uniquely their own. We could also say that this is a bit of a relationship of fate. And it might have been more of one if Charles had had the stuffing to actually use the email address Heather gave him when they saw each other by chance as he was departing the country for good. Thankfully, fate can overcome many barriers, including Charles's romantic ineptitude. While we were discussing this ceremony, Heather told me that the tone shouldn't be too serious. As she paraphrased Charles, cancer is serious, relationships aren't. And thinking about that, I don't believe that Charles means that relationships aren't supposed to be taken seriously. In fact, I would say that behind his plain undershirt uniform, he is a very honorable, even chivalrous man, a knight in a white crew neck, if you will. What Charles means is that the ideal relationship is one that comes naturally, that makes everything else easy, and that everything else brighter. And that is exactly what he said to me about Heather. She has made my life brighter, fuller, and happier. Even as blessed as we all are to be here in settings like this, to have our families and friends, to not be hungry, and to want for very few things, none of our lives are filled solely with happiness. We can only hope to have a true partner to bear with us through the difficult times. For Heather and Charles, there have already been many of the decisions and commitments that some couples face early in marriage. Choices about careers and family, decisions that are sometimes less about options and more about realities. Since then, they have faced challenges more serious. Hopefully, every committed couple spends more time in health than in sickness. Their relationship, which, as we've seen, is based in passion, has already been tested by pain that made physical closeness impossible to bear. When we were discussing these trying months, it wasn't Charles that described his crippling back pain or the accommodations he had to make. It was Heather that described them to me, as you would expect from a true partner and a couple who are committed in sickness and in health. Meanwhile, as Heather saw other couples facing the most difficult decisions of all, she came to realize that, God forbid, if she faced those decisions herself, Charles was the person she wanted by her side. He's everything to me now, she said. To summarize anything about our marriages, what else can we want from them except a partner about whom we can say, I would want him there to help me make my decision, to speak for me if I were unable. They have both found that person in each other, a traveling companion for life itself. Now, Charles and Heather will seal that commitment with the vows of marriage. Charles Franklin Haynes, do you take Heather Ann Radford to be your wife?
I do.
Do you promise to love, honor, cherish, and protect her, forsaking all others and holding only unto her?
I do.
Heather Ann Radford, do you take Charles Franklin Haynes to be your husband?
I do.
Do you promise to love, honor, cherish, and protect him, forsaking all others and holding only unto him?
I do.
You will now present these rings to each other as an outward symbol of your marriage. Charles, please repeat after me. With this ring, I, Charles Franklin Haynes,
I, Charles Franklin Haynes,
take you, Heather Ann Radford,
take you, Heather Ann Radford,
to be my wife,
to be my wife,
to have and to hold,
to have and to hold,
in sickness and in health,
sickness and in health,
for richer or for poorer,
for richer or for poor,
and I promise my love to you
and I promise my love to you
forevermore.
forevermore.
Well done. Heather, please repeat after me. With this ring,
With this ring,
I, Heather Ann Radford,
I, Heather Ann Radford,
take you, Charles Franklin Haynes,
take you, Charles Franklin Haynes,
to be my husband,
to be my husband,
to have and to hold,
to have and to hold,
in sickness and in health,
in sickness and in health,
for richer or for poorer, Sorry, I shouldn't have more. I have failed you.
I had a cold last week.
Where were we?
Sickness and then health.
For richer or for poorer,
For richer or for poorer.
and I promise my love to you forevermore.
I promise my love to you forever.
For those gathered here, it's incumbent on all of us, as we can, to honor and nourish the commitment we've seen here today, and to live in our own relationships to the fullest. Heather and Charles, before these witnesses, who traveled far and waited somewhat patiently for this moment, you have said your marriage vows and exchanged the wedding rings that will be a constant reminder and outward sign of your union. And after those acts, I now pronounce you husband and wife. You may now kiss the bride.
Woohoo! You did it! Woohoo!
Ladies and gentlemen, the bride and the groom will be taking photographs. Feel free to visit.
Gorgeous.
Refreshments and hors d'oeuvres are available. They will be